So next on our agenda is the presentation of the Shirley Case Leadership Award for Global Citizenship. So this award is presented to an individual in Atlantic Canada who demonstrates a spirit of global citizenship in a local, national, or international capacity, and who has helped create a more just and sustainable world. This year, we're honoring an emerging leader, a young change maker that has recently engaged in the development or international cooperation sector, and who embodies the spirit of global cooperation. So the award was created in the spring of 2009 by the ACIC Board of Directors to honor the life of Shirley Case, who was killed in Afghanistan on August 13th, 2008, while working with the International Rescue Committee. Shirley had worked as an intern with ACIC in 2004 and 2005. She spent 4 months here in Halifax and 5 months working with our partner organization, the NGO Coalition for the Environment in Calabar, Nigeria. I knew Shirley in a work setting, but also considered her a friend. And I know that she would be so proud that her legacy continues to honor young people that are making a difference in the world. However, it does sadden me that this year, as we present the award, the situation in Afghanistan continues to be dire. Our solidarity remains steadfast towards the people in Afghanistan and their constant struggles with the risks of conflict, COVID-19, and climate change, as well as the uncertainty over the stalled peace process between the government and radical extremists. Despite all of the challenges happening in Afghanistan and around the world, I'm left hopeful when I hear about young people who are making positive changes in their own communities, both locally and globally. One of the prime examples of this is the winner of the 2021 Shirley Case Leadership Award. I'm pleased to announce that this year's recipient is Hannah Martin, who was nominated by Catherine Anderson on behalf of Breaking the Silence Community Council. And we are delighted to have last year's recipient of the award, Delvina Benard, to present the award to Hannah. Delvina is a 6th-generation Black Nova Scotian and is the principal founder of Afrocentric Learning Institute of Nova Scotia. Delvina has been at the forefront of Canadian Afrocentric education movement and is currently serving as the EDIA advisor at Mount St. Vincent University. So I turn it over to you, Delvina, and thank you so much for being here today.
Jennifer, thank you for that introduction. Appreciate it. I'm really excited to be here to pass the baton. The continuity is so very important in this kind of work. And just off the top, I want to say that ACIC deserves much applause and its own award from my mouth to thank you for the work that you do to amplify the work that folks are doing. So I'm really, really pleased to do this. You mentioned EDIA work that I do at Mount St. Vincent University, which I'm so pleased to be a part of that work, that social justice work of changing institutions. And I just even wanted to say, it's so interesting how all of this work all connects back to each other. Like even last week when Mount St. Vincent issued its apology to First Nations communities for its role in residential schools in Canada. And I was happy for that because I'm pleased to be a private organization that is into reparatory justice, because that is one of the areas that is a passion of mine, is reparations and making good and doing better and healing our many equity-seeking communities, and of course, mostly the First Peoples, the Mi'kmaq of this land. And our recipient this year is from that very illustrious community. So as someone who received this award, I just want to say briefly, and it was an honor really, and a privilege. And it opened up a lot of conversations with people, both publicly and in my private circles, about the need for a social justice vanguard like ACIC. And these conversations, I think in many ways led to opportunities to further my social justice work and development goals, both here at home and abroad, like more opportunities to speak at international, everything's virtual, right? To speak at international events, but they were all virtual. But because of the weight of the work that ACIC is doing, and so this year's recipient, who's already doing so very much, I just want to give her a heads up and a warning that once this goes out and that information is out, you're going to be besieged with support, besieged with requests to add your perspective, not like you haven't already been doing it, to the work that has been going on. So get ready for more work. You know what they say, the reward for good work is more work. So be ready for that. I'll say that. Enough about me, but I only say that to segue to our recipient. So I was honored to have the opportunity to sit with the committee of ACIC, the staff and the members to select this year's recipient. But before I introduce her, I want to just say a few general comments about the wealth and sort of the breadth of this year's nominees. I don't know what it was like the year that I was nominated, but let me tell you, this year was amazing. There was an incredibly talented, diverse group of nominees. They showcased, I think, the impressive work that's being done by young people to highlight local and global issues, as well as the fact that they are being cooperative and participating at a global level. Something my generation in early times didn't know about. Technology, for all we can say about it, it has enabled this generation to collect with people, to connect with people globally. And our young folk here in this region are certainly doing that. For instance, these impressive nominees are involved in everything from working with local refugee communities, to storytelling as a political tool, to participating in youth delegations at international conferences, to starting up their own advocacy organizations to combat issues that affect their communities both at home and abroad. And I think that's very impressive. I really wish I had time to share every nominee's resume with you, but we don't have that kind of time. But suffice to say that this year's recipient is amongst a cohort of extremely dedicated and talented individuals. So that said, needless to say also, it was a very difficult task for our selection committee to choose one individual out of all of these stellar, of this very stellar lineup of individuals. So for this year's Shirley Case Leadership Award. However, as you know, it's been announced after mulling it over and looking at the wealth of dedication of these amazing rising star young leaders, we did in the end, as a committee, unanimously select one candidate who we feel, as we know, best exemplifies the spirit and the purpose of this award. And that person, as we know, is Hannah Martin. And I'm just going to pause for a moment. We know it's her, but just to give a moment of space to absorb that Hannah Martin is this year's recipient and how much we are so pleased to say that. Draw it in. So I want to tell you a little bit about Hannah. Hannah Martin truly embodied what I recall saying last year when I received this award. I remember saying I wanted the up and coming generation to keep struggling to demand social justice, to act in a way for justice locally and globally by getting educated about local and global issues. Well, Hannah has done exactly that. She's gone over and above what one would expect any young person to be able to commit to given the turbulence of this time. And even right now, doing that in the midst of a pandemic, but she still has remained committed to her goals and to the global social goals. She works tirelessly with a fierce commitment to connecting local, indigenous issues and cultures and values and the environmental struggles in Mi'kma'ki to global international issues. Whether she's representing the Peace and Friendship Youth Alliance at the UN Indigenous Forum, whether she is volunteering with Maritime Breaking the Silence Guatemala Network, working with the Rabino Maya Achi New Hope Secondary School for the grandchildren of genocide victims, or coordinating the Peace and Friendship Program at Talamagouche Center. And no matter what she's doing, has shown unwavering dedication to sharing knowledge, building community, and fostering international cooperation. Just last week, I think if folks, and I know everybody on this call, because it's like preaching to the choir, I know everybody on this call has already been tuned in to the fact that we have the thrilling or exciting news when it was announced that the Alton Gas project has been decommissioned in Nova Scotia. And we know how long this struggle has gone on and how many bodies have placed themselves before that issue to get this resolved. So when we hear this kind of news, we have to give thanks to and recognize the diligent work of the grandmothers, of course, of the water protectors as well. And also people like Hannah, okay, who've been putting in the kind of work and advocating to protect Turtle Island and the Shubenacadie River since time immemorial. This has been passed down to her from her community to make sure that she also has that. And so this is amazing. When I read about Hannah and learned about these things and looked up everything I could about her and seen that she has followed in the tradition of protecting Turtle Island, I was very, very, we all were, as we sat around, very, very impressed. In 2019, Hannah was chosen to not only represent Nova Scotia at the Daughters of the Vote Summit in Ottawa, but also to address the Prime Minister of Canada during question period. Well, that's pretty impressive, I think. And she spoke passionately and clearly from the perspective of a young Mi'kmaq woman and raised the environmental concerns from the Mi'kmaq grandmothers surrounding the Alton Gas project. So that's another reason why we celebrate even more. And I think we have to all agree on this call that that's a major and impressive win for a up and coming emerging leader. Hannah is a natural collaborator, and that shows through in her curriculum vitae. It shows through in the work that she's doing and all of the good references and letters that came to support her application. And she is a community builder, she's into global participation and international cooperation, which is truly what the Shirley Case Leadership Award is all about. She truly encompasses the core values and the spirit of the Shirley Case Leadership Award. So deepest thanks are owing to ACIC for highlighting this incredible young leader and for doing work to showcase these emerging young leaders in the Maritimes. So we thank them for that. And we also want to thank all of the nominees who let their names stand so that we had an opportunity to bear witness to the work that they're doing. And your names will also be resounded among others so that it will ripple out. And once it's in the air, it will only create more joy and more work. So without any further ado, it's my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce to you the 2021 recipient of the Shirley Case Leadership Award, Nova Scotia's very own Hannah Martin. Hannah, congratulations from all of us.
Wow. Well, I want to say Walalio, Walal and Delvina, for the beautiful, beautiful words that you've shared. I have to say I'm beyond touched and I'm beyond moved by this acknowledgement of the work that I've done. Not alone, the work that I've been involved in my community and in my communities over the past number of years. It was such a surprise. I really didn't know it was coming. And I got a call from Catherine Anderson yesterday while I was actually on a job site at work. I was watching some black ash trees being transplanted yesterday, and I got a call from Catherine Anderson, and we talked about the award, and we talked about Shirley Case, and we just kind of reflected together a bit. And I had the opportunity to thank her on behalf of the Breaking the Silence Committee for the nomination. And I just need to express my sincerest gratitude and humility and thanks for this acknowledgement. But really, as I was reflecting on this award, I truly feel the work that I've always done has come from, as you could probably see in the video in my addressing the Prime Minister, it has always come from a place, an ancestral place of a deep rooted passion and need for justice in our communities. And I'm not very good with having the spotlight on me, whether you can believe that or not, but I do all right with it. But I really, from the beginning, the kind of work that I've been drawn to do, it's just something within me that it's really hard to explain where it comes from, but it's very deeply rooted within me. And it always has been from the time I was a young girl. And ever since I really came into learning more about who I am as a Mi'kmaq woman, as a Mi'kmaq Scottish woman, and learning about the injustices of my own people in my own homeland, that was really where it all began. And then as I started to learn about these injustices that my family had endured historically and that my communities and nation has endured historically, that was really the beginning for me. And once light was shed on a lot of those injustices, it only continued to grow my passion and my determination for social justice, not only in my own homeland, but learning about the injustices that are so present in many communities around the world, especially Indigenous communities in the global South, and other nations that I've met in my travels, whether I was in Guatemala or in Aotearoa, New Zealand, or nations that I got the opportunity to collaborate with at the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. I just feel so grateful and so deeply blessed that I've had the opportunity to walk this path as a young person, and to be so exposed to these opportunities to work together and to help one another find justice in our own communities with our own struggles. I really feel that I've been given the gift of my voice. That's one of my gifts, that I've been given the gift of community work to be able to do the work that I do. And I do feel very privileged for that. And I feel very fortunate for that gift. And in reflection, I feel that even with accepting this award, I really want to emphasize that this is a celebration for all of us. This is not just a celebration for myself. I truly feel that the work that I've been able to do and that I've been involved in is really thanks to the support and the inspiration and the work of those like yourself, Delvina, who've come before me, the generations past, all the ancestors who died, literally died, and are people who continue to die on the front lines in these struggles, and how real that is for us. And that passion that I carry really comes from that place of just that what's been passed on from those who've walked before us. And I just really want to reflect and emphasize that And I want to encourage us to celebrate all of the work of the nominees this year. And I can only begin to imagine the work that they've done and just the power and the capacity that they have to make change. It really makes me so emotional. And I reflect on my mentors. I reflect on mentors like Catherine Anderson, who supported me when I went on my first delegation to Guatemala with Breaking the Silence, and who really inspired me to begin my journey as a change maker on a global scale. It really was thanks to people like Catherine Anderson, Jackie McVicker, Lisa Rankin, Jeremias Teku, some of the names of folks that I really found that first inspiration to branch out and begin my journey of social justice on an international level or a global level, and just the importance of coming together, especially as Indigenous, Black, and people of color communities, that we come together and work together to find justice in our communities. So I really want to acknowledge my mentors, the elders, the grandmothers, and the clan mothers who have guided me in ceremony and on the front lines, who've allowed me to work with them to help emphasize our collective voices. There's just so many people to thank for that. And so I just want to take this opportunity again to express my gratitude, my deep gratitude. Sincerely, it's such an honor. And I'm also reflecting on Shirley and the work that she did as a young person, as an activist and a change maker. And yeah, I'm at a loss for words, but I want to say thank you, Walal, into the ACIC for this opportunity. I feel inspired, especially after 2 years of being in a more difficult position with COVID, to be able to do this work. I feel very, very inspired and motivated and honored to be acknowledged. So I think that I'll leave it there, but I really just want to say, Walalio, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, everyone. It's just such an honor, and I can't wait to continue doing this work. So Msit Nogama, all my relations.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it back to Jennifer, and on behalf of the committee, to say one more time, congratulations. And I was so impressed with your resume that I dug down in my glasses box to find my one pair of orange glasses and my orange blazer in African, because I wanted to dress to honor you. So
Lolin.
I'm so impressed with you, and it's just something that we do in the African Nova Scotia community too, to honor each other like that. And so again, congratulations from all of us, and I return the chair to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Delvina, and thank you, Hannah. Congratulations again. That was so moving to hear both of you talk, and it just makes me really proud to be part of ACIC and to be part of the work that's happening locally and globally. So congratulations, Hannah, again. We'll move on to the next section of our symposium, but I'll go through a few housekeeping reminders. So first of all, a gentle reminder that ACIC stands for Respect, Inclusion, Humility, Safety, and Solidarity, and we will not tolerate any communication or behavior opposed to these. So please keep this in mind when interacting with each other in the chat box and breakout rooms and on our social media channels. We have some of my colleagues are here, Roshni and Joelle, for tech support. So use the chat box if you have any questions or any tech issues. We're going to be holding questions and answers at the end of the panel. So if you have questions on the panel discussion, you can share them, and we'll go through as many as we can in the question and answer period. So without further ado, our second panel is on the implications of COVID-19. It will focus on opportunity for change the pandemic has posed to the world. Again, as a reminder, there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. So if you think of anything, you can put that in the chat box and we'll take care of passing them along to the moderator. This panel will be moderated by Brennan Gugu, and Brennan is another young person that we have worked with at ACIC. Brennan is a 24-year-old Mi'kmaq from Millbrook First Nation, Nova Scotia, and he is currently working with Ilnuig Indigenous Communities Foundation as a youth engagement officer for Nova Scotia. In 2019, he spent 4 months as an intern with Run for Life, working in Nandi County, Kenya. And prior to his international internship, Brennan gained most of his experience working as a consultant with Three Things Consulting, based out of Kingston, Ontario. Welcome, Brennan. We're so happy that we have you here today to act as the moderator for this panel discussion. And I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the panelists and to run the show. So thanks, Brennan.
Awesome, thank you. I'm just going to read the chat real quick. Just congratulations, Hannah, well-deserved and earned. Congrats, Hannah. Congratulations, Hannah. Congrats, Hannah. So just want to do another big ups. Congrats to Hannah Malta, Hannah Martin, fellow community member of my community, Millbrook First Nation, where I'm from. I did just want to address my error. I'm actually 25, I'm not 24. So, I know that's a big difference, but just wanted to address it. Yeah, I've been super excited for this panel all week, honestly. I'll just start really quickly with my most recent experience with ACIC being the IIY Indigenous International Internships for Indigenous Youth. And I spent 3 months in Mware, Nandi County, Kenya. And it was some of the the best time of my life. I learned so much and I met so much amazing, beautiful people, and that having that experience right before the COVID-19 pandemic was it was integral in me getting through the pandemic. So without further ado, I'll start by introducing our first. I'll start with Bernard. I want to just correct me right away if I say this wrong. Benard Mware. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. So Benard Mware is a doctor, has a PhD. He is a community development expert in community mobilization, participatory evaluation and training, monitoring and evaluation, strategic partnership, linkage, and connections. He's a global expert with work experience in USA, Australia, Africa, China, and Singapore. He is also an experienced research scientist and plant pathologist. He works at the Biosciences Eastern and Central Africa Hub based at International Livestock Research Institute, Nairobi campus, supporting research for development of new varieties of sorghum resilient to striga infestation. I hope I said that right. Benard also works with Mikinduri Children of Hope Foundation Canada to support community development projects in Eastern and Western Nyanza regions of Kenya. He also works as a monitoring and evaluation consultant with Child's Canada to support agriculture and nutrition programs in Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, and Zambia. So thank you so much for joining us, Benard. And I just want to say, if you guys hear a dog losing his mind, we're watching my cousin's beagle, and beagles are notoriously just bad dogs because he's a duck hunting dog, and his owner went to go duck hunt in the States, and so we have him for the week, and he's already peed in 8 different spots in the house in the past 2 days. He's in the kennel screaming right now. So yeah, I just no dogs are being hurt in the background here. And so our next guest panelist, Blair Crawford. Blair is a recent international development studies graduate from McGill University and is the Sustainable Development Goals SDG Program Director at Engage Nova Scotia, an independent nonprofit organization whose focus is a vibrant, inclusive, and resilient province In their work, Blair oversees the coordination of a 3-year initiative to advance the UN SDGs in Nova Scotia. Blair also sits on the board of directors of Future at 20 and is a founding member of the organization's Mensis Empowered Period Project, which through convening leaders in the fight against period poverty seeks to identify what is feasible to achieve as a national collective and work towards implementing creative solutions. Well, and thank you, Blair, for joining us. And our third panelist, Kaylin Sack. Kaylin is a two-spirit, non-binary Olnua and Neiwao. I hope I said that right. I don't think I did, but please correct me soon. Educator from Sabeganagadik Indian Brook Reservation. They are currently living and thriving in Jabuktuk, Halifax on the unceded, unsurrendered lands of Mi'kmaq. Kaylin is working at the Halifax Youth Project as the BIPOC support services educator. Kaylin's biggest passions include practicing decolonial ways of teaching and holding space, uplifting young brilliance, coffee, and horror movies, which is it's a perfect time for that right now. Just really quickly, Kaylin, like out of all the new horror movies that have come out, like the Scream, Halloween, those classics being reimagined, what's your favorite?
I really love the idea of revisiting Halloween, where Laurie Strode has become like this sort of anxious, rough old woman. I love the idea of like older women characters being like really, excuse my language, badass in a sense, and like aggressive, and also being like really obsessed with a certain goal or devotion. And I love the idea that from a young age, she was teaching her daughter how to protect herself. And I think if you don't want to go too deeply into it, it also feels like a good allegory for just like the fear of men in general. I think it's really quite interesting. So I love that whole concept.
That's awesome. Thank you. And Blair, Benard, feel free to jump in. I would love to hear you guys' answers. I'm a big movie buff myself. I've been spending a lot of time this week just watching horror movies and stuff. So
I'm not a big horror movie buff, but did recently rewatch Beetlejuice with my partner. So can say that if you haven't seen it, it's a classic and highly recommend. Too scared to watch anything else.
First of all, thank you, Brennan, for the great introduction and the chance to be part of this panel this afternoon. I'm also extremely scared of horror movies, so I basically avoid them at all costs. I want to enjoy my sleep at night, so otherwise I keep, rewinding them in sleep, and it's easy to jump off the bed and find yourself on the floor in the middle of the night.
yeah, that's my favorite part right there. Yeah, I just wanted to ask that because I just wanted to get us thinking about, just those simple things that, improve our quality of life, like those simple little things that we might take for granted sometimes, like taking some time to watch a movie that you love. So just with that being said, I wanted to ask the three of you, starting with Benard, when we do consider our quality of life as a whole, it really has been affected by this pandemic this past 2 years, I'd say, or however long this has been going on. So I just wanted to ask, to you, what has been the most striking thing about this pandemic in terms of, the improvement or opposite of your quality of life?
Again, as I said, I really want to take the opportunity, Brennan and team, to first thank Mikinduri Children of Hope Foundation for nominating me to participate in this symposium, but also thank the ACIC committee for also giving the opportunity to participate. Really, this pandemic has, been really a big challenge. But one particular thing that stands out for me is the effect of this pandemic on the many phases of our quality of life. And we could talk a lot about the restrictions that I could not move to the village, to the rural areas to see my parents. There's one time I couldn't even move from what we'd call from one village to another, or from one town center to another, which are probably just 10 kilometers radius. So completely disabled, the opportunity to freely move and be able to continue to exercise, those usual things, going out to be able to meet with friends and just enjoy your evening, the Fridays. So the limitations of just the freedom, sometimes even infringing into the freedom of some levels of rights. For example, the freedom to worship. There for nearly 9 months, couldn't go to church. So, those limitations on very, very basic freedom of movement and freedom of worship was a really big deal. But also, the communal thing, always the social gatherings, when you have time to, take my children, to the grandparents and meet with their friends, those things that probably adds to the, the quality of life, because just the psychosocial support that, previously I took for granted, now completely shut out. Of course, there are many things we can talk about this, but those are the particular ones that personally, are a challenge. But of course, we see clinically, the fact that the virus is thriving on already existing impairments to our quality of life. For example, just weighing heavily on people with pre-existing condition, but also the fact that even when you have recovered, from this virus infection, you're likely to end up with some post-infection syndromes like fatigue, distress, and all these things, mental instabilities and things, things that affects your quality of life even after infection. So those are the peculiar things, some directly, but also, as I said, medically, those are really striking things about this pandemic.
Wow, and thank you so much for sharing. I do have to say, just from my short time in Kenya, that community aspect was so huge. It was such a big deal of us, getting ready to, everybody went to church on Sunday, and or everybody would go to a funeral for a local community member, and there was so much just walking around from like between villages and visiting and meeting people, and so many people also like just helping out with agriculture, on their farms and stuff, and I can't imagine not being able to do that. I remember talking with one of my friends, and he mentioned that because they were out training to be athletes, to be runners, so they are staying at this one camp to train, and during the pandemic they could not go back to their to their homes to visit their families, and I know that's something that everybody around the world can relate to. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that. So I guess I'll just ask the same question with you, Blair, just in terms of those little things in the quality of life that you might have overlooked, or maybe even the big things that really affected you. What were those things that were most striking about this pandemic and are right now?
Yeah, thank you both so much. I think even before the pandemic, through something called the Quality of Life Initiative, Engage has really been trying to sit in those deeper questions, both around what's driving satisfaction and also what's shaping overall well-being for Nova Scotians. And over like the hundreds of questions that we asked Nova Scotians through the 2019 survey, the strongest correlation that we see with low life satisfaction is actually relating to experiences of negative personal mental health issues. So low life satisfaction most highly correlated to personal experiences of negative mental health. And we're also seeing from those survey results kind of this reiteration and reinforcement of how important those social connections, Benard, that you were talking about are as well for our overall well-being. And we're observing too through those results that low sense of community is actually highly correlated to low overall life satisfaction. And then also trickling back to mental health is impacting with lower self-reported mental health as well. So I think we all know that throughout the pandemic, those kind of issues related to mental health, social isolation, low sense of community have been kind of on the rise. And even when I think of like my experiences, just as a human who lived through lockdowns and is continuing to live through, but I'd say, I guess, is an ever-changing pandemic, I see those things being true just for myself and my own experiences. And I'm thinking especially true kind of in those moments of like Zoom fatigue, burnout, and wanting to be connected with folks in ways that would help my social isolation go down and my mental health go up, but knowing that those ways that I could get in contact with people were sometimes the culprit for why I was feeling so low. So yeah, I guess going back to thinking what's most striking about the pandemic, I'm coming back to mental health, social isolation, and also social connectedness, those kind of pieces and the impacts that they do inevitably have on our overall well-being. But I also think like I'm a little bit hopeful too that despite all the harm that we've seen happen through the pandemic, and I won't get into that because there's much and too much to speak about in a short period of time, but I'd also like to think that the pandemic is giving us a bit of a sense of some of the bigger questions around what's mattering most for people and really pointing to the importance of furthering quality of life and well-being, particularly like as we move forward through the pandemic, whatever that will play out to look like, but beyond as well. And I think we're becoming more and more aware of how important our relationships are. And I'm really, really hopeful that those learnings about relationships and social connection aren't going anywhere anytime soon.
Yes, community. Thank you for highlighting that. That's something that I really struggled with, the self-isolation and coming home and being at the pandemic and not being able to, like you said, the community. But one thing I did notice, okay, so I grew up playing a lot of video games. And during the pandemic, I got back into it pretty hardcore. And I started playing, on Xbox Live online with other people. And one thing that I found that I really thought was cool was that like a lot of my friends, it was kind of like back in the day, like when video games were like the biggest thing, like online. And it's a lot of more people online actually talking and interacting and stuff. And so I started to become better friends with my friends' online friends. And so I started to, like, as I was physically losing my personal community, I started to gain this other virtual community, and it started to help me a little bit, and I mean still does now. Like I'll go and play with people from my buddies from Australia or something, and we'll talk about like the differences there and how life is going. So I just helped you that has helped you curve that, or even just to tackle that issue of the self-isolation and the loss of community, that loss of connection.
I'm sorry, Brandon, you cut out there a little bit. I'm not sure if you were asking another question or just pointing to the importance of those new ways that we find ourselves in.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I thought I did too. Yeah, I was just asking if you wanted to add on to it, if there's anything that you found that has helped you, maybe like building a virtual community or I don't know, maybe you got a fish and made a community, made that your own community. I was just wondering if there's anything that you've noticed that has helped you in that manner.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really interesting too to see the different ways that people are defining and finding communities throughout the pandemic. I would probably have considered myself quite a social person before. That's not to say that I'm not now, but social in the sense that I needed people around me physically to feel like I had that connection. And when that's kind of stripped away from you, it can be hard to find what community means. But yeah, I was studying last year during the pandemic. I was in online school, and even those like study group sessions really were something I found myself getting drawn into. So yeah, as much as I said before, Zoom fatigue was a very present thing for me, and all the different ways we get connected socially online, I think it was also a bit of a savior for me as well. And that was the main way that I was able to interact with people. So yeah, I'd love to see the different ways people are getting involved online and off now as things, at least out this way, start to open up a bit. But yeah, thanks for that.
There's always hope, basically. I love that. Okay, now, Kaylin, I'll ask you the same question. Just in terms of the quality of life things, and I know we started speaking about your love for movies, and I can only imagine that because of how it happened with me during the pandemic, my love for movies has, I've always loved movies, but I just love them even more now, and I find myself looking at movies differently and just enjoying them in different ways. So yeah, I was just wondering, just what you had, any thoughts that you had about around that discussion of the quality of life.
Yeah. First I just want to say it's pronounced Callan. I know it gets really confusing. Grammar is always such like a
Thank you.
no worries. I always tell people it's like calendar, but without the der. It's like really silly, but I understand where the confusion will come in. But yeah, I think like even tying it back to the conversations of movies, I think so much people who have been very affected by the pandemic are really searching for comfort in various ways. So there's more sort of like revisiting of comfort movies, like The Devil Wears Prada, Practical Magic, a lot of like different, things to get people to calm themselves down, because with something as horrific as like COVID-19, people's anxieties are so elevated and their fears are so heightened to this particular degree, not even just from the fear of death, but the fear of like losing your quality of life. I think so much what I am seeing from especially young people is just like a heightened sort of awareness of mental health, because everybody's mental health is like plummeting, to put it like very like crassly. I'm not sure if anybody here uses TikTok, but I honestly think TikTok is a very sort of like interesting doorway into looking at the human condition, especially for like youth, and like queer youth of color in particular are starting, or at least have been more openly discussing how their mental health is being affected by loss of contact and communication. But also, I think so much that young people and people in general are starting to be more aware of the downfalls of capitalism. So let's look, for example, where I'm located in Halifax. We are currently facing an unprecedented housing crisis where the price of living has gone up exponentially, especially considering the amount of people who have been coming to live in Halifax from Toronto. The prices of like apartments, condos, and gentrification is rapidly speeding up. So there's like nowhere to live anymore. Nobody can afford to live on their own, and people can barely even afford to live with a roommate. And I think this sort of awareness of how, loss of jobs, loss of income, loss of access to money, has really sort of made people aware that the system is flawed and it is not conducive to actually living life, like even as well as our parents have lived life. Like baby boomers, for example, the cost of living is so much different nowadays for young people in comparison to many generations ago. And I think there's so much more awareness that it is a system that is not, it's not like possible for everybody to live at least decently. And I think that's really quite interesting from like my perspective as somebody who has like always been working or has been working for at least a long time, that it's like impossible to at least find a little bit of joy anymore if you cannot afford joy. And I think that sometimes, leads to, oh, well, money shouldn't buy happiness, but like also money buys food, at least in this society and under capitalism, money buys food and money buys shelter and security and entertainment even. So I think there is a large, like, disillusionment from, the promises of America and the promises of Canada. There's more awareness that like actually this isn't a utopia and capitalism is a trap. So I think everyone's like mental health is like really just like quite taking a nosedive because everyone is feeling unsure if they could even achieve the life that they wanted for themselves.
It was very well said. Thank you so much, Walal and Callan. It's perfect because I next wanted to ask about mainly that comfort stuff. And, as humans, we often struggle with change. We're pretty bad at, we're pretty good at evolving and adapting, but I think we're pretty bad at accepting it and enjoying change. So just with that being said, preferring comfort and familiarity, how do we stop ourselves from getting back to the status quo? And, just like, how do we recover from this in a way that we are coming out, I don't want to say on top and healthier, but just coming out of it. I don't know what I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but I just, like, how do we come from surviving in a pandemic to then again thriving and, taking back our comforts and taking back our familiarities and making new ones, if that makes sense.
Brennan, was that mine? Or could I
sorry.
jump in?
Yeah, that was, anybody can jump in. Feel free. Yes, please.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, Brennan, that's a very interesting question to start with. So if we assume first that it is possible to stop people from returning to status quo, as I say, let's assume. Because I can tell you, here in Kenya, we only have less than 2% of people fully vaccinated. And just 1 week ago, we got the night curfew lifted. And as you travel around, you basically see people thinking that COVID is gone. The infection is finished. The president has opened up the space for us to continue with our life. And that's why I'm saying that if it were possible to be able to prevent people from returning to status quo. So there's a lot of conversation and a lot of efforts that have gone on since the pandemic, started. there has been a very concerted effort by different stakeholders at the government level, globally, World Health Organization. And so there's a lot of effort in terms of creating awareness, there's the education and the training opportunities and the conversations. So one of those things that I think different institutions, governments, organizations, individuals must endeavor to do, keep doing what we have been doing. If it is conversations with, within communities, if raising awareness in terms of, the indirect benefits of adherence to some of the guidelines, for example, in what we have observed over the period of, people aligning themselves to the, COVID-19 restriction guidelines, is reduced, prevalence of communicable, particularly those respiratory, diseases, apart from COVID-19. There were reduced, cases of flu, this common cold, just because of, the hygiene and people wearing masks, people keeping social distance, people washing their hands, and that really, really lowered. And so, our effort at every point we find ourselves, we keep those conversations going. The efforts by, the government in terms of raising awareness, campaigns, but also finding alternative ways for people to still make a living. Because one of the extreme impact that actually could cause people to continue the way they have been is their endeavor to be able to make their livelihood, put food on the table. So coming up with probably social protection, programs that can enable people to still find their livelihood without necessarily returning to the previous way of living in the context where it is possible. So those are in opening up this part of the discussion. Those are, the few things that are, I could be able to directly pick. Let's continue the conversation. And, these conversations could continue, at different level, even the legislation and, making some of these things part and parcel of our life, of our day-to-day life. For example, if we have infrastructure in our offices where now it is very easy to keep sanitizing, for example, that will ensure that, frequently people can sanitize. If we have, the issues of restructuring the office spaces and expanding, education facilities to make sure that, the number of students per unit area is still aligned to some of these COVID-19 regulations. So I could go on and on, but those are some of the things that perhaps may help us to reduce the speed with which we get back to the status quo.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I just my internet cut out there, so I missed the last few parts of that.
If I can jump in.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks for that, Benard. And I think, my answer ties a bit last to what Callum was saying. So I think that really, like, in these moments of discomfort, unknown, and in a lot of cases fear, there's these massive systems, like Callum was saying, that are really trying to, like, pull us back in and calm us down and bring us back to the status quo. But I think what many of us have known before, and some of us are learning now, is that these systems frankly just haven't been working, and instead are exacerbating inequalities that existed long before the pandemic. But I come to you from a Nova Scotia context, and I think I want to bring that kind of local perspective in, is that some of the research that we've done has actually shown us that there's some kind of shift or something perhaps happening across the province where people are starting to pay attention to well-being and quality of life as maybe a special something or an organizing principle perhaps for all of society. So I'm going to throw some stats at you, and they're not that intense, but just kind of to like paint the picture of that a bit. So in 2015, way before the pandemic, we asked Nova Scotians how they think that we should measure success on a scale of 1 to 10, and 68% said by growing the economy, and 81% said by improving our quality of life. And we decided to actually re-poll that question during the pandemic, so in August 2020. And this time around, 58% of people said by growing the economy, and 82% said by improving our quality of life. So that 10% change there between economy before and now. And to me, what that means is that like during these really unprecedented times of change, at least Nova Scotians are standing up and saying they're not willing to go back to the status quo, and instead are really wanting to reimagine futures that put well-being, both of themselves and the well-beings of others first. And there's this continuous articulation from 2015 through to now of the enormous importance of quality of life as a special kind of something across the province. And I'm having the suspicion that it's not really just unique to Nova Scotia, that perhaps this is true globally as well. And I mean, to make it a little bit more practical, I guess, then one way that I think we could perhaps stop ourselves from just slipping back into that comfort zone and those big systems that have told us that this is how it is and this is what we should be and that this is okay and we'll be safe here, is actually just taking the time to stop and consider what matters most to us. And then actually from there, support some of those initiatives that reflect the futures that we want to see. So I know that the pandemic has been a bit of like a whirlwind, but I also think that it has given some of us this opportunity to like stop and pause, and that's not to undermine have had where we maybe haven't been able to do that. There's been a survival mode, but for some of us, we've been able to stop and pause. And I think to avoid slipping back into that status quo requires us to just sit in that for a moment and take the time to consider really what matters most to us individually and collectively, and then really move forward in that. So sorry to come at you with some stats and from a Nova Scotia specific lens, but I think it's really pointing to something there that we're not ready to go back to the status quo and that we actually won't.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I do just want to thank you for mentioning that is a Nova Scotia perspective, because I think that can be applied, especially in many places in Kenya as well, that rural aspect, that local community aspect. And I love that you mentioned to support the initiatives that we want to see, that reflect the things that we want to see in the world. I think that's along the lines of what you said. And so just, with that being said, I think a big thing that I've taken from this is that community, this all comes from community, and we have to really focus on community, and we have to focus on listening to community. And so just from the perspective of Kaylin and Blair specifically, with your roles working with youth, how do we not how, but are there any like key initiatives or key messages or key themes that you see within our youth, specifically in Nova Scotia, because those are your regions, but just in general that you see at the community level that could be replicated or translated into other contexts? If you need more clarification on that question, please feel free.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. If you don't mind, if I could speak to a little bit about the returning to the status quo question, and then I'll answer yours if you're okay with that.
Yes, please.
Thank you. I have to agree with Blair's sentiment in that I feel like a lot of our youth and like the general public is actually refusing to go back to a form of status quo. But then at the same time, you see so many folks like anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers who have been wanting to go back to the status quo even before the pandemic even started. whoops, voice crack, in a sense where they deny its existence and they think anyone who believes in it are sheeple. My favorite word of the year now, sheeple. And I think it's so quite like interesting how there is sort of this like aggressiveness to assert their own oppression, I guess, if you will, of people who refuse to wear a mask and to get vaccinated because they believe so like deeply in this idea of freedom, and for some reason wearing a mask is taking away their freedom and their individuality, so far as to equate the process of wearing a mask, like a face covering, to being a victim of the Holocaust. And you can't really see where these connections lie, but in the minds of these anti-vaxxers, they lie so heavily that they fight for this like idea so much, even though it's ridiculous and extremely anti-Semitic. So, and then on the turnaround, the people who are trying to move to like reject this idea of the status quo are the folks who are realizing that so much, like as I said before, our systems are incompetent. I mean, let's even look at the justice system. You know, BLM has existed for many, many, many years, but there was like a heightened sort of spotlight on the Black Lives Matter movement initiative and reality that didn't like exist before the pandemic. And you know, now so much our youth are realizing that the ways in which we conduct justice is flawed and is highly centering of the white narrative, the white perspective, and especially the white male perspective so much. And everyone is now more aware of the fact that, you know, if you are a person of color and the police has been called on you, there's a very real chance that you could die or face an unjust form of justice from all points of power systems. I know it seems like I'm getting on a bit of a tangent, but I think so much that there's more eye-opening to how the government and how like the world actually works, and a lot of people are fed up with these injustices and are unwilling to move beyond this or to like move past this idea of like creating new forms of justice. Anywho, that was just like my idea on the second question. Could you repeat what you had asked Blair and I?
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer, by the way. That was very beautiful and well articulated. I just wanted to ask, just in the terms of the youth context, is there any key initiatives or key themes that you guys notice at a community level that can be replicated or translated into other contexts with everything that we've been talking about in this panel, along the lines of the implications of COVID? So again, just the any key initiatives at the local community level, more specifically around youth, if you have any.
I can answer this very quickly. I feel like so much now young people are sort of trying to fight for disability justice from a Nova Scotia perspective and from a Halifax perspective. If anyone is unfamiliar with Halifax, there are a large number of buildings that are considered heritage buildings that that the city refuses to update because of like historical reasons. But however, a lot of these buildings have stairs, have like narrow hallways, and are like inaccessible for entry to people who may require the use of a wheelchair, for example, or who may require the need of crutches. So I think so much young people are starting to think about disability justice in a way of you know, how can we gather support and fight for our future, but like also be able to include all voices? Because if we are meeting in like an old house that has like a stairway to enter, then you're automatically refusing entry to people who cannot physically enter that building. So young people are very much fighting for this sense of accessibility. More accessibility means more involvement and more outreach.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's basically creating access to community is what people are doing. Well, I guess is what the youth want. I love that. Blair, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I do, and less so from the youth perspective, but first just wanted to say, Callan, thanks for that reminder that there are some folks that do really want to return to the status quo, and I think it's important to pay attention to that piece as well. So just thanks for bringing that up. And yeah, an initiative, it's not as much youth focused, but kind of goes back to that conversation we've been having around social connection, which I think threads its way through all of these things. So yeah, in our small organization at Engage, one thing that we tried was this initiative called From Me to You. And what that really was just an initiative for that has an open invite for people and organizations to write letters to someone in their community to let them know that they matter. And while that's really like a seemingly small gesture, we really leaned into that initiative last winter because of our learnings from the Quality of Life initiative that were showing us kind of this intertwined and inseparable relationship between connection and well-being. So over the last winter, what really happened was we printed 19,000 note cards and then invited other Nova Scotians as well to just write letters to those around them in their community. And by the end, we were really reminded too of how creating stronger social connections and kind of working towards sense of belonging can help create this kind of togetherness feeling, which is really important just in general, but also as we kind of move through this pandemic. And while of course that initiative in and of itself, note writing, could be replicated in other contexts, to me what's like more important than that is kind of the sentiment that lives below that initiative, which is that of strengthening social connections, and then those impacts that can have on our overall well-being. And sorry, I use well-being and quality of life language quite a bit just based on my work, but I think they're becoming common vernacular now too. So I think it's important to note, right, like the pandemic isn't over, and I don't think we all know necessarily where it's going to go from here in an Atlantic Canada perspective, but also globally. But I think one thing we do know is that there are still people that are feeling impacted by social isolation across the globe, no doubt, that is fact. And sometimes I get myself thinking is like, what would happen if we collectively all dedicated some time to just reaching out to people around us, telling them, as simple as it might seem, that their voices are important, and then actually taking that one step further though, and ensuring that the people we reach out to then are part of the perspectives that are used in our plans to build back. I think that's like a really important step for me. And it's something that we're kind of thinking about at Engage. And while it can really seem out of a comfort zone, like I know myself personally, the thought of reaching out to someone new is like, that's scary and very intimidating. But I think really like at its core, initiatives that are working to strengthen social connection and kind of combat that feeling of isolation, which we know is tied to mental health, which we know can be tied to so many other things, even like Benard was saying, like expression to be yourself and to worship freely, like all these things that can be connected by not being social. If we can focus on initiatives that work on that piece, I think that's really, really important. So not as much connected to a youth perspective, but I think ties in quite well in all those other ways.
It definitely ties in. Thank you so much. I love all of this. So I'll just really quickly, just before we get into the Q&A, I do want to give Benard a chance to answer this question. You don't have to be highlighted in a youth perspective. I was just asking Blair and Kaylin, as that is their focus in experience. But Benard, are there any key initiatives or themes that you notice at the local community level that could be replicated or translated to a context outside of your personal communities?
Yeah, thank you, Brennan. really appreciate the contribution by Colin and Blair, really deep. There's a lot of initiatives that have been supported by Mikinduri Children of Hope Foundation here in Kenya. Time may not allow me to be able to list all of them, but one that is standing out, especially in the middle of this pandemic, is what we call community economic and social, welfare groups. This is, a mobilization of community groups, comprising men, women, youth, different age groups, and basically want to mobilize resources. So we have here in Kenya, where people save, a small amount of money, and they can loan to each other for purposes of either business or to be able to attend to emergency. But these social groups are also an opportunity, what we call psychosocial support. And because, some of the individuals within those groups have, different issues. So we have groups that are basically having, different special, what we would call the special need, people that are able differently. And you could get into a household, one household where there is a child with an autistic child, one with a Down syndrome, and another one with cerebral palsy. So formation of these social groups allows them opportunity to encourage, inspire each other, mobilize these resources to either sometimes to attend to a medical emergency, but also where they can also interact and just engage at the social level where they're motivating each other, sharing their problems, and being able to, understand that, I could be going through this, but when my sister or my brother or my friend talks about their problem, probably their problems is 4 times bigger than mine. And so these are units that are currently providing what, even the government cannot be able to provide. And as Blair and Colin have alluded, the mental health is a big deal. And our health system, mental health is always at the backyard. It's not mainstreamed enough. And what we've seen is basically now the government coming to with this prioritization or mainstreaming of mental health, especially for the caregivers, the doctors, the nurses, but at the community level. That is not replicated, but these social units act as a point where, people that are depressed, undergoing anxieties, are wondering where their meals will come from or their school fees will come from. Find opportunity for solace, find opportunity for some minimal resources to be able to continue with their life. And, Mikinduri Children of Hope Foundation has funded, the capacity building of this community group, both in Western Kenya and in Eastern Kenya. And they are extremely, offering the psychosocial support, as I said. And if that is something that I think would be very useful, at the different, demographics, having these social groups for psychosocial support, for mobilizations of resources where the government cannot be able to reach, because our governments sometimes are limited. But if we find initiative that goes to the lowest level of our communities, we can be able to, address the post-COVID syndromes, because sometimes the government do not have the machinery to even assess the post-COVID or post-disease or post-pandemic syndromes. But within the social units, they are able to identify that so-and-so doesn't seem to be well. There seems to be something bothering this individual. And then they mobilize them, themselves together and try to address those issues. So that is one example that I could give. There are many more, but that is one that stands out in this post-COVID situation.
Thank you so much, Benard. And I just want to say thank you to the three of you, all of you. Walala, and thank you, Sante Sana, for Migwedge for sharing your insights and messages, and so much wonderful things and happening and being done and shared. And so we're just going to move quickly to the Q&A. Just a reminder to everybody watching or listening, feel free to shoot your questions in the chat. And so I'll just start with this one question that we have, and feel free to jump in as the three of you feel right. What do you feel is being or has been done to mitigate the decline in mental health caused by the pandemic?
I'm sorry, do you want to go, Benard?
I just wanted to allude to the fact, I kind of alluded into it a little bit. The fact that, for example, here in Kenya, one of the things that, the government now has prioritized, health system, is basically mainstream the mental health, especially, the psychosocial support, within, because one of those, statistics shows that the mental health challenges are extremely prevalent among the healthcare workers, and also the post-COVID, syndrome cases. And so we find, units that are now being, established within hospitals to ensure that the mental health is really prioritized. At the community level, what the government is doing is to train, we call them here community health volunteers. These are individuals at the lowest level or administrative levels, deep in the rural and community areas, who have given their time to be able to support, community health. So government is beginning to train them, on the specific, how do you diagnose, cases where somebody's degenerating into, some mental problem, and also the actions to take, the issues of referral system from, those community levels into more, detailed healthcare service facilities. So those are some of the things that are being done. But as I said, the capacity of our governments may not be able to go to each and every. And so being able to form these social groups that, the communities already have some form of friendship. They have a way of living together. They have known each other. And it is very easy for them to actually identify in their midst individuals that are seemingly having some challenges. And so be able, establishing these, social groups, that could continue to be able to, support those individuals at those lowest level, remain very key in the needed psychosocial support, but a way of identifying and making referrals for where mental health services are needed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Kaylin, did you want to add as well?
Yeah, I think in terms of like tackling mental health, I think young people and folks in general are starting to try to like live in a way that is prioritizing unapologetic joy. And what I mean by that is, like, folks, especially like if you view TikTok, are so less full of shame regarding the things that bring them a sense of calm, pleasure, or serotonin even. So folks are much more open about their drug use. Folks are much more open about their sexuality. folks are much more open about their rage, their anger, their fury even. There's sort of willingness to be more like open and honest about what it is that like you need. And I think if you are somebody with power, you should be at least a little bit caring and like addressing of this need. For example, if anyone here works with like young people in like the education or like health sector, you know, there's going to be a lot more trans or like gender questioning young people in your lives coming in and out and expressing themselves in ways that are unique and maybe you don't quite understand. But also think of it less as like rebellious and think of it more as moments to make yourself happy, doing things that make you feel beautiful, make you feel more connected and grounded to your own self, and put away any like dress code or stigma that like you have with like young people or folks expressing themselves, and support them or mind your own business in a sense. Like let young people figure themselves out and let young people find what makes them happy, and also protect them when other folks are being bullies or being violent or being inappropriate even. I think there like needs to be more room for young people to be creative and to do what they want. Of course, like in the guidance, but you know, be attentive, but like also don't think too hard about it.
I love that. Just supporting people and minding your own business. I haven't heard that, but I love that. I'm gonna start using that all the time. Just Blair, if you wanted to add on anything, feel free.
Yeah, thanks. I'll be quick because I'm aware that we're almost at the time, but I think thanks to you both for answering that as well. I think pointing to that there's a lot being done that we might not even recognize as being initiatives that are meant to mitigate mental health. Like when I think about From Me to You, by no means was that an initiative that had mental health as a top focus. It had social connection, but the ways that those things are inherently linked. And I think, yeah, there's tons of work being done, speaking from a Nova Scotia perspective across the province, but globally as well, in ways that we might just not see that is something that is having a positive impact on mental health. So keep it there because I know we're out of time, but thank you both for those answers as well.
Yeah, awesome. Just really quickly, thank you all so much, Sante Sana, Walalan, Miigwech. It was really wonderful moderating this panel with you guys. You guys are all really amazing humans. So thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Jennifer. Walalan.
Thank you, Brennan. And thank you so much, Blair and Bernard and Callan. That was really inspiring to hear you speak. Brennan, I loved how you drew out the answers from the panelists and encouraged them to go a bit deeper. I think I really appreciated the thoughtfulness that you all brought. I loved, Callan, your reference to TikTok being the doorway to the human condition. I love that. I'm also gonna rip that off and have some conversations with my kids about that. It's so interesting. I mean, within the last panel and with this one as well, to see some of the similarities that people are facing around the globe due to COVID-19, and that this common desire for relationships and connection and community, so important. And you folks have really illustrated that with the stories that you've told in this panel. So thank you so much for your words. And thank you again, Brennan, for moderating this panel.